Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 1st of September. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast right here on Arirang TV. It's fabulous to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The National Assembly begins its 100-day regular session today, but the political impasse over the special Sewol-ho ferry bill will likely hinder Parliament carrying out its legislative duty. A White House official says the United States is willing to reopen sincere and trust-based talks with Pyongyang, but the regime must first show it's ready to denuclearize. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin dramatically raises the stakes in the Ukraine conflict by calling, for the first time, for talks on the statehood of Ukraine's restive east. Our top story this morning is right here in Korea, though, and the National Assembly begins its 100-day regular session on this Monday, but rival parties are in a political impasse, and that could affect the government's 2015 budget proposal. The parties are at odds over a special law aimed at investigating April's deadly Sewol-ho ferry disaster in much greater detail. Lawmakers have not, in fact, processed a single bill since July, with the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, staging sit-ins and boycotting all parliamentary proceedings. The 2015 spending bill has to be passed by the end of November, or the government risks starting the year with a provisional budget that funds only the basics, and that could halt payments to government employees, the elderly and people in need. Now, recent reports of a US official making a surprise trip to the North Korean capital of Pyongyang had many wondering if Washington had a change of heart on its North Korea policy. Well, the White House says it hasn't, but could there be some subtle signs of a slight shift in direction? Our Choi-Sun has this report.
Washington is sticking with its policy of not engaging with North Korea just for the sake of holding talks. In a written statement to South Korea's Yonhap News, National Security Council spokesperson Patrick Van Trell said the U.S. is open to dialogue with the North, but will decide on re-engaging with the regime based on its actions and not words. By actions, the spokesperson said Pyongyang would need to show it's sincere about ending its nuclear weapons development and that it's ready to fulfill past commitments. Unconfirmed reports of an informal meeting between U.S. and North Korean officials in Pyongyang and the North Korean foreign minister's attendance at the UN General Assembly later this month have fueled speculation of renewed dialogue between the two sides. There's something to make out of Washington's statement, especially as it comes after its informal civilian meeting with North Koreans in May. The Obama administration may have decided to maintain its North Korea policy following that contact. On the other hand, the NSC spokesperson urging the North to use a New York-based channel instead of civilian routes to communicate with the U.S. deserves some attention. Washington's soon-to-be-appointed six-party talks envoy Sidney Seiler, the post in charge of the New York channel, could seek to better utilize it. The Obama administration can certainly make use of that channel to control North Korea's provocative behavior ahead of midterm elections in November. And the three Americans detained in the North, widely speculated to have been the purpose of the reported trip to Pyongyang by an American official, could force the U.S. to seek negotiations. Choi-Sun, Arirang News.
Now, with renewed hopes of bringing North Korea back to the negotiating table, South Korea plans to send its top security advisor to Washington in the coming days. The South's presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-uk says the two sides are discussing the national security chief Kim Kwan-jin's trip and that it would center around cooperation with his American counterparts. The trip, widely expected to be around the Chuseok, or the Korean Thanksgiving holiday, which is next week, would be Kim's first, in fact, as the top presidential advisor. Topping the agenda would be the likelihood of Pyongyang agreeing to Seoul's proposed talks on the prospect of lifting some sanctions on their joint commercial projects. Now, in a rare display of foreign sports stars and loud cheering in North Korea, professional wrestlers have been bringing circus-style mayhem to Pyongyang. Some watchers speculate the event, which was co-hosted by a famous Japanese lawmaker, would help improve relations between Japan and North Korea. Our Son Jong-in has more.
The crowd cheers as renowned names from the wrestling world like Bob Sapp and Jerome Le Banner take to the ring. The last time Pyongyang hosted a pro wrestling competition like this was in April 1995. Foreign media reported on the event, taking a greater interest in the changes they have noticed in the state, such as its developed infrastructure and increasingly savvy spectators.
This is the first time I've watched such an event. It was very impressive. I hope these friendly games take place more often for the sake of unity.
Some American visitors were in attendance, including Pras Michel, who co-founded the hip-hop group The Fugees.
The infrastructure seemed really good for a third world country. You know,
at least what we're allowed to see.
Right. Well, yeah. Exactly.
With guests like Pras Michel, who is a friend of U.S. President Barack Obama, some speculate it was North Korea's move to improve its international relations, but experts view it as an ordinary sports diplomacy event that Pyongyang has been holding for a long time.
The move is seen as North Korea's way to show that its young leader is active and friendly to the people by hosting athletic events.
In line with the competition, Antonio Inoki, a Japanese wrestler turned lawmaker who co-hosted the event, met with North Korea's ceremonial head of state Kim Yong-nam over the weekend. They are believed to have exchanged views on Japanese nationals who were abducted by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
Now, a Japanese professor who's been pushing for a resolution to the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of tens of thousands of Korean women has a really rather grim outlook on the matter. He says public sentiment on the issue has plunged in Japan following what he says is Seoul's rejection of Tokyo's previous efforts to make amends. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Japan has done its best to resolve the issue of its wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women, and the Japanese public will not allow for fresh apologies or a higher degree of compensation than was already given. That's the grim outlook put forward by Yasuaki Onuma, a professor of international law at Meiji University and the former director of the Asian Women's Fund. Set up by the Japanese government in 1995, the fund collected private donations and sent compensation to 364 former comfort women in Taiwan, the Philippines, the Netherlands, and Korea, each of whom received roughly $30,000. The government also provided direct funding for medical care for the recipients and issued hand-signed letters of apology from then Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama. In a recent interview with a group of Korean reporters in Tokyo, Onuma said hardline Korean civic groups were largely responsible for the current impasse. He said the Korean Council for the Women drafted for military sexual slavery by Japan harshly criticized the 7 Korean comfort women who decided to accept the money, saying they were once again selling themselves to Japan by taking Japanese cash. Onuma ruled out a revival of the Asian Women's Fund, pointing to the icy public sentiment in Japan. He said many Japanese people feel the country put its greatest efforts into resolving the comfort women issue and was rejected by Korea, adding that similar actions will not be allowed amid the current nationalistic tide in Japan. The Japanese professor said the individual happiness of the comfort women must be prioritized and that the issue should not become entangled in the diplomatic feud between Korea and Japan. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Monday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by, as always, for us at the News Centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for the statehood of eastern and southern Ukraine. This to, what he says, protect the legitimate interests of the people living there. What exactly does this mean?
Well, Mark, that's the question analysts are asking as well. When that interview of President Putin calling for statehood for a separatist held territory in Ukraine ran on Russian TV on Sunday, initially some in the Western media questioned whether this was Moscow finally coming out to publicly support the pro-Russian rebels fighting for autonomy. But President Putin's spokesman later insisted that the comments did not amount to such an endorsement, adding that only Kiev can reach an agreement with the separatists. President Putin, though, while calling on Kiev to launch substantive and meaningful talks immediately, also had warned in that interview that Russia as a state cannot stand aside and do nothing while relatives and friends are being shot at by Ukrainian forces. He reminded the West that Russia is a strong nuclear power and that it's best not to mess with us, to borrow some of his words. Now, Kiev has said it is open for talks to give the territories more say in the way that they are run, but did refuse to negotiate with the armed fighters they call international terrorists backed by Moscow. Political protests in Pakistan turned fatal Sunday as police clashed with opposition activists calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. They allege Pakistan's leader was elected via corruption and election fraud, an allegation the 64-year-old has denied. The confrontation in Islamabad, the capital, was triggered late Saturday night, ending with 3 people killed and almost 400 others wounded. After the deadly clashes, Pakistan's army commanders expressed their concern but said they support democracy, as Prime Minister Sharif was elected in the country's first civilian transfer of power. Thailand's former army chief and now Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has named his members of cabinet. He's placed current and former military generals to lead the ministries of defense, justice, commerce, and foreign affairs, among others, making up more than 1/3 of the available positions. General Prayut was officially made interim prime minister last week after receiving the king's endorsement, a post he is to hold until a general election is slated for next year. Now, concerns have been growing that Thailand will be ruled by the military after Prayut had led a bloodless coup against the elected government of Yingluck Shinawatra earlier this year. A partial building collapse in an eastern suburb of Paris has leveled part of a 4-story apartment with deadly results. At least 2 people, a young child and an elderly woman, were confirmed killed after an explosion rocked the structure around 8 o'clock Sunday morning local time. Authorities say 12 people were pulled out of the rubble alive, though 4 were seriously hurt. The blast is believed to have been caused by a gas leak. An investigation has begun as rescue efforts continue.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. Arirang News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. The Korean government is considering raising the 2015 budget by roughly 5%, a move aimed at balancing the need to boost the economy while maintaining the country's fiscal soundness. The expansion is lower than the increase requested by government ministries at about 6% and much lower than the about 10% increase in spending that experts had expected. Now, Yulian reports.
A lawmaker from the ruling Saenuri Party who has been briefed about the government's budget plan says it's highly likely the government will expand next year's budget by about 5% for a total of 373.6 trillion won, or roughly $368.4 billion. While the hike is higher than the 3.8% rise for the 2014 budget, it's much lower than the 10% bump expected by analysts and the 6% requested by government ministries. The government had previously said it would continue its expansionary macroeconomic policy until the economy gets back on the path to recovery, and it had unveiled a new $40 billion stimulus package back in July to pump up the economy. But according to another Saenuri lawmaker, a major budget expansion has proven difficult given the decline in revenue from the sluggish economy. As part of the plan, similar or overlapping government projects will be merged or abolished to cut costs. However, there will be budget increases. Following the deadly Sewol-ho ferry disaster that left over 300 dead last April, the government plans to increase the national safety budget by 12% to about $13 billion. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now, while developed nations have been trying to reduce household debt levels since the global financial crisis, Korea's household debt has actually, unfortunately, been hitting new heights each and every year. Although recent deregulatory measures in Korea have given housing prices a much-needed boost, they have also given the potential to cause debt levels to swell even further than they are now. Gwon-soo reports.
Korea's household debt has not only hit another high, standing at over $1 trillion in the second quarter. The upward trend is the exact opposite of what's happening in developed nations, which have seen their debt levels decline since the 2008 financial crisis due to a focus on lowering debt levels. According to the Bank of Korea, the national debt rose from $714 billion in 2008 to $1 trillion at the end of last year, putting Korea high on the OECD's list of highly indebted nations. Korea's debt has grown by an average of 8.2% per year from 2008 to 2013, while that of countries like Germany and the UK have shrunk by 0.5% and Japan shrank over 1%. Financial experts say households in developed nations have either filed for bankruptcy or paid off their debt, but that of Korea's household debt threatens to keep rising. The upward trend is attributed to a recent set of measures that relaxed mortgage lending regulations but could spur household loan growth. In addition, the Bank of Korea lowered the interest rate by a quarter percentage point in its August session to 2.25%, which is the first such cut since May 2013. The government believes the pace of household loan growth is not yet cause for alarm, as the new measures have also helped pick up the housing market. But experts like Standard & Poor's analyst Ritesh Maheshwari say the growing debt poses risks to the banking sector as there is more debt than disposable income. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
Right, well, it's Monday, and that means one thing, Industry Insight. And this week, we're going to take a look at the local electric car battery makers that are competing to gain an upper hand in an industry that's considered by many to be one of the next major growth engines. Our Hwang Jie has this report.
Technology evolves as it's commercialized. Same goes for electric cars, which are still too pricey compared to their regular counterparts that nobody wants to buy one. The key to slashing the price and luring more consumers to this carbon-free auto market is cutting the costs of the battery, which accounts for 40% of the car's total price. So could the electric car era hit anytime soon? Take a look.
By 2020, more than 10 million eco-friendly vehicles powered by batteries are expected to be on the roads.
And this industry of tomorrow is taking root here in Korea with a couple of local companies spearheading the global electric car battery market.
Korean battery makers LG Chem and Samsung SDI are expected to make up half of the industry's market share this year. LG Chem recently won a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars from Audi, while it has already secured 20 global customers, including General Motors and Ford. Samsung SDI supplies batteries to German premium automaker BMW. Experts say Korean players are better positioned at this point.
The competitive edge of local battery makers have strengthened since developing batteries for mobile phones and other home appliances. Based on that, they're now building up their technology for batteries in electric and hybrid vehicles.
Battery life is not necessarily an issue anymore. Companies already have the technology to develop a battery that can run around 320 kilometers on a single charge, enough for a normal daily drive. But the key is in building an electric car market that's big enough for them to drive down the price. And in the long run, securing as many customers, that is automakers, as possible to set the industry's standard first in this fairly new industry is the key to success.
The electric car market is still in its early stages, so once battery makers establish business relationships with automakers, it's likely to continue for decades. It's important to secure deals, although they might face losses for now.
There's no room for too much optimism for Korean electric car battery makers, with their biggest competitor Panasonic teaming up with American electric car maker Tesla to build a massive battery factory in the U.S. It's a big leap by the Japanese battery maker that's pushing to break through from niche territory. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2014 World Badminton Championship, where the Korean men's double team were guaranteed a gold medal after the Lee Yong-dae, Yoo Yeon-sung and Shin Baek-cheol, Ko Sung-hyun pairs advanced to the finals. But quite a surprise during the final as the 10th-ranked duo Shin Baek-cheol and Ko Sung-hyun beat out the top-ranked Lee Yong-dae and Yoo Yeon-sung duo 2-1, winning the men's double gold. And with the gold medal finish, it's the first time in 11 years that Korea has claimed the gold medal. And speaking of first-place finishes, 18-year-old Jeongyeon, playing at the Bangkok Open Challenger, became the youngest Korean to win a Challenger tournament. Now facing off against Australia's Jordan Thompson in the men's final, Jeongyeon cruises through in straight sets, 7-6, 6-4, after being down 2-5 in the first set. The first-place finish makes him the youngest Korean to win at a Challenger event, giving him a nice $50,000 prize as well. And now shifting over to the 2014 FIBA World Cup currently taking place in Spain. The Korean national basketball team lost against Angola 80-69 in their first game and went up against Australia on Sunday. Trying to bounce back from their first loss, the Korean national team tried their best to stop the Australian offense, but their size and power too much, as the 9th-ranked Australia dominated the entire game, winning 89-55. And now moving over to Sunday night's K-League Classic action, FC Seoul and Jeju United drew 0-0 with Jeonnam defeating Jeonbuk 2-1 in a close match. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Ulsan Hyundai Tigers play a big game against the Pohang Steelers. Now both teams playing very aggressive from the start here with several yellow cards in the first half, but it's Kim Shin-wook in the 26th minute of the match who heads one past the goalkeeper for a 1-0 Ulsan lead. But just 3 minutes later, it's going to be Pohang Steelers' Kang Soo-il, the equalizer, as the match goes into the second half tied 1-1. But just 3 minutes after the second half kicks off, it's Kim Jae-sung who gives Pohang the 2-1 lead. Now with a total of 8 cards being handed out, including a red, Pohang hangs on to win this match 2-1. And now finishing things off with some Sunday night KBO action, the Doosan Bears remain red hot with a 10-6 win over the NC Dinos, with the SK Wyverns beating the Kia Tigers 4-3 and the Nexon Heroes shut out the Samsung Lions 7-0. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Lotte Giants take on the LG Twins. And of course, going into the game here, third inning, Hwang Jae-gyun deep to left field, got a 2-run shot, and the Lotte Giants have a 2-0 lead. Fourth inning, Park Jong-yoon RBI single to center field gives the Lotte Giants the 3-0 lead. But in the bottom of the sixth, Lotte a 5-0 Lee Byung-gyu 2-run double to left center cuts the deficit to 5-2. But the ninth inning, Hwang Jae-gyun closes the curtains with his second home run of the night, a solo shot, as the Lotte Giants win this game 6-2. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Despite the cool and breezy morning and evening hours, the heat will continue to sweep the peninsula with highs hovering near 30 degrees Celsius. But due to atmospheric instability, central parts of the nation will see sporadic showers in the late afternoon, and it's forecast to be a quite heavy one, so be sure to take an umbrella with you on your way out. But the rest of the nation will see mostly to partly sunny skies throughout the day. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul and Gwangju will rise to 30, while Daegu and Busan will hike up to 28 and 27 respectively. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 26 and 29 respectively, and Dokdo should see highs of 23 later in the day. Now nationwide showers are in the picture in the midweek again. It will start from the southern regions on Tuesday afternoon, then spread to upper areas by Wednesday, and it's going to be a heavy one as well, and temperatures will be dipping down into the low 20s even here in Seoul. Well, that's all for now, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon. And that's all we have for now. Do enjoy the rest of your Monday, wherever you're watching us, and stay tuned to Arirang TV. I'll be back with Ojin Ju for our next newscast at noon Korea time. Till then, goodbye.